I remember there was this defunct magazine now, and it was called, oh gosh, Houston Metropolitan Magazine. And they put Jackson on the cover. His crown was with forks and spoons and knives. And the name of the story was The Prince of Parties. And I'll never forget it because he was that.
Jackson used to make a little joke about how a poor boy from rural Oklahoma became the arbiter of taste. And of course, Jackson was also a very good businessman. So when you combine the sense of style and elegance, his ability to connect with people, and his understanding of the bottom line, you have a very successful career.
There was not a lot of in-home entertaining on a larger scale. It was all done at the hotels, or it was done at a special events place. Well, he really opened up the idea of having a party at home for 30 or 40 people. And he did it with such grace and style that he just catapulted onto to the Prince of Parties. It was a really fast track for him.
He would design a whole party around a piece of silver that he bought for the table. It was a real extravaganza to go to his home and have dinner. I mean, every single detail was unbelievable.
But when I actually moved here and made my debut in this building across the street, Jackson contacted me and invited me to dinner and threw a welcoming dinner party for me, which was just so beautiful. I'll just never forget it.
In some ways, Jackson lived preserved in amber. Many of the things that he cared deeply about don't matter much to a lot of people. There are probably fewer and fewer people who care about manners and elegance and every detail being perfect. But Jackson did, and I think that's the way I'll remember him.
He looked out for the concerns and interests of other people first in every regard, in a social situation, in a business context, in a not-for-profit world. He was worried about others before he was worried about himself. And that's the definition of a gentleman for me.
That's what made him successful in business. It was that attention to detail in every aspect of his life. And so if it was the way he dressed, it was right. It was done correctly. If it was dealing with the Queen of England or the First Lady of the country, he was presenting himself properly in that moment. And that followed through to the way he did events and what he cooked and everything. I don't know how there were enough hours in the day to be Jackson Hicks, because it's just so specific, so perfect.
Jackson, for me, was the kind of friend. When I was diagnosed with cancer, Jackson was the first person I called. Sometimes Jackson would heave a great sigh and say, I don't know where you get a hot dog in Paris, but we're going to find one. He wasn't a snob. It was easy to think he was a snob, but he wasn't.
He had a way of not only dressing, but carrying himself that was really just wonderful. And then Milton would come in behind him and totally steal the show. Milton, just as wonderful as Jackson would look, Milton, all eyes would be on Milton when he walked into the room.
Jackson would not have been the Jackson he was without Milton being a part of his life, loving him.
Jackson was unthinkable without Milton. The love they shared together, which goes on, was something that all of us who witnessed it just knew was something rare and special.
Jackson had an innate understanding of people and his clients, so he knew exactly how to fine-tune an event that would make them comfortable as well as delighted with what was going on. I mean, he really knew people well.
The whole house went dark. The lights just went out, all the power went out. And Bobby and I and all of our, party clothes went out to the garage and with the flashlight, and we're trying to find out where the breaker is. And by the time we got back in, he had every candle lit. And it looked way more beautiful than before.
And we thought, should we turn the lights off again? Maybe we don't need the light.
So that was how he just made lemonade out of lemons.
Jackson had called me earlier and wanted to know what could he bring. Celery, clean celery. And Richard told me,
The biggest caterer in Houston. And she wanted celery.
but it has to be done right. I don't like those strings. And I knew that Jackson would have it right.
He loved her. Because who would ask Jackson Hicks to bring celery?
He was so charitable and he would help. And I would, if I were working with some organization, I could turn to him and say, hey, listen, can you help? And he would. He was giving you his all the time, and helping and believed in you. And so that made him special, different than a lot of people.
A group of people created the Center for AIDS and asked me to serve as the original board chair. That was great. The one thing that we lacked was everything. We had no money. We had no place to meet. Jackson came to our rescue like he did to so many people and organizations.
We're going to be benefiting from Jackson Hicks' legacy for generations because of his quiet support of those organizations that support Houstonians.
I miss Jackson tremendously. I think that Jackson had a real sense of how lucky he was to have the life that he did. And he only felt comfortable living that life if he also gave huge portions of himself and his time and his money to causes that meant a lot to him. It really drove his life and allowed him to be the elegant gentleman that he was in everything that he did, but with this passion for helping others at the same time.
If I needed a word to describe Jackson's food, it would be
Oh my God.
A great inspiration.
Orchestrated.
Comforting.
Scrumptious.
Elegant.
impeccable.
Jackson's food was always accurate.
Elegantly delicious, just like the man.
Gone. I would have eaten it all.
I think I would call it sublime. And that was Jackson. That was Jackson's persona. That's the way he lived his life. That's the way he served his table.